Ramsuratkumar ki Jai. Sarvam Yogi Ramsuratkumar Ashram Like every day, it's one more day, a day of Nama Sankirtan and satsang. A day without Nama Sankirtan and satsang is a day that has not been lived. So let us be thankful to Bhagwan for giving us this opportunity to be together in His Nama. This is oneness in Nama. We have been going through day after day for quite some time now, different experiences of different devotees with Bhagwan. So here are two more stories of his glory. They are not stories in the sense they've been made up, but they have been lived. And today, by recalling every detail of their experience, we shall make it our experience by reliving it. This concerns two great sages who lived in our times. We have seen them, moved with them, were inspired by them. And the inspiration, the torch of inspiration, is still running our life. The incidents are very simple. They may even sound worldly, but there is a depth of devotion and the leela of grace. And let's recall that Bhagwan, even at remembering his coconut shell, would bring a flow of grace. And what to say of experiences of the devotees who have lived those experiences. There is one Mrs. Ganga, a staunch devotee of Paramacharya. She wanted to marry her youngest daughter off. And of course, she would go to Paramacharya for everything that concerned her family. And she went, had darshan of Paramacharya, and then put before him her problem to look for a suitable bridegroom for her daughter, Vijayalakshmi. Of course, Paramacharya blessed. At this time, Pradosham Mama, an uncle by name Pradosham, he came to be called so. And he suggested some name, and Paramacharya approved of it. Said, okay, go ahead. She was happy that she got the signal from him. So she approached the bridegroom. He said he had no objection at all. But when she approached his parents, the parents said that they had a daughter to be married off, and it's only after the marriage of their daughter they would think about they could do the marriage of their son. So it seemed that she had to wait until then. She did not mind doing it. But then, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 3 years were gone. And still, they would not give any positive answer. So when she approached them again, they said bluntly that she could look for another bridegroom. She was naturally very upset about it. After all the waiting, this is the reply that they gave. Sometimes things happen like this. But then she was worried, she was upset, but then it was okay. She went and met Paramacharya again. And this time there was a young man around, walking about, and Paramacharya pointed to him and said, "You can marry your daughter off to this boy." After that, she was still worried about it because, the practical details. It was very much like the last time, and so she was not very sure. And then she thought of visiting Bhagwan also, because she was devoted to him also. In fact, when she was young, and she had gone to Thiruvanamalai, she had come to Thiruvanamalai with her mother. In 1982, Sri Jayendra Swami had come to Thiruvanamalai. He was staying in Voyamat. When our Swami, Yogi Ramsuratkumar, came to know about it, very excitedly, he went to Voyamat. It was his habit, just like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Wherever great people came, he would be the first one to go after them and pay his obeisance to them. Just like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. I had myself been a witness to such practice of Bhagwan. So when he was waiting there, Jayendra Swami was in puja. He was absorbed in puja. And after the puja was over, he went inside, and all the people who had witnessed the puja, who had come there, assembled, they had all gone inside for food. And Swami was just sitting there with Swaminathanji, who was his attendant at that time. And they were waiting. This Ganga saw that Swami was not invited to food, and he was just sitting there, and she did not know how to take him in, whether it was proper for her. But then she felt so bad that Swami was not eating at all. She ran to her mother. Her mother would not eat outside. She always brought some fruit or something with her. And so she approached her. Mother had brought some mangoes. So she took a mango and some curds to Swami. And there was a banana leaf, and she gave it to him. And Swami was very happy. He happily accepted. He ate it. Next day also, she took another fruit from her mother and some curds. Next day also, Jayendra Swami was staying there in Voyamat. So our Swami again went there, and Ganga fed him once again. And after that, she became very devoted to Bhagwan. She was coming off and on for his darshan. Now this was her turn to come to him. So when she came to Sannadhi Street, she put forth her problem that the daughter was rejected by the first one after 3 years' wait, and that she was worried. Then Bhagwan smiled, and immediately, people would keep some money and some fruits and something or the other as an offering to him. Bhagwan pulled out a 100-rupee note from there. There was also an empty cigarette box. So he wrapped it. He wrapped the box in the rupee note, and there was a packet of grapes. It was packed and bound by a thread. He took off the thread from the packet, and then here he tied the rupee note, 100-rupee note, and the empty cigarette box together nicely, and then dropped it into her hand and said, Ganga's daughter will be married grandly, her daughter's marriage will be celebrated grandly. He raised his hand in benediction and pronounced this blessing. She was very happy because she was also worried about the expenses. And here Bhagwan was giving her some money, and then she knew that aspect of marriage would be taken care of. And the same, when she returned home, the same day afternoon, she got Paramacharya's message that this boy Raghuraman, the other day he approved. He said you can marry your daughter off to this boy. It seemed that Paramacharya himself called him and asked him to marry Vijayalakshmi. And so Paramacharya had sent word to her saying that she could go ahead with marriage arrangements. Now she knew that both the Mahatmas, that Yogiji knew that Paramacharya had already told Raghuraman that this was being arranged by Paramacharya, and Yogiji supplied the money for it, the financial aspect. See, the two Mahatmas worked together. They were in complete communion with each other. There was such oneness between the two. True to Bhagwan's word, Ganga's daughter's marriage took place in a very grand manner. How did she get money for it? Her son was working in Dubai at the time, and he had saved a lot of money which he sent to her for the marriage expenses. And so you see, every aspect of marriage was well taken care of by the two Mahatmas, and Ganga was very, very happy. This is just as, it looks like a worldly incident. It's just a wedding and two Mahatmas' blessing. But imagine how many people would have been inspired, how many people would have, their faith would have been strengthened, their devotion would have been deepened by this. It also shows the two Mahatmas, they seemed to be two different poles. Paramacharya had a lot of regimen to observe. He would bathe and do the Vedic rituals, the Vedic pujas. His way of life was totally different from the way of life of Bhagwan. He had a mutt to run, and he was deeply rooted in the Vedic culture of India. He was encouraging all those Vedic scholars, he was supporting the Vedas, he was protecting, he was arranging for the protection of the Vedas and Vedic Pandits. Paramacharya had done so much for the Vedas. Bhagwan, on the other hand, was in the streets like a beggar of the ancient times. He did not bathe for 40 years. He would have bathed 3 or 4 or 5 times at the most. And that only if he found some water supply in the fields of the farmers. And he would not change his clothes easily. He was wearing dirty, tattered clothes. His hair had not seen oil at all for so many years. But there was one tradition, there was one particular aspect that struck me. Paramacharya used to carry a danda, they call it danda, a stick in his hand, and a saffron cloth was tied to one end of that. And Yogiji was also carrying a bamboo stick in his hand. And he used to tie some dirty cloth, not exactly clothes, but thin tapes of old clothes from his dhoti. He would tie them up to one end of his stick. So it was the rule, the scepter. They were carrying the scepter of God, both, though they were traditionally very different from each other. And there was such oneness between the two. There are many devotees who have witnessed some more incidents, the communication that existed between the two of them. There is another incident. One Venkatraman and Vijayalakshmi couple, they were living in Thiruvanamalai at that time. Venkatraman was working in the Department of Education. And one day his wife visited Bhagwan at Sannadi Street house. And Swami unusually gave this lady his hand fan to fan him. And after that, he lay down. And she was fanning and fanning and fanning for 3 hours. After 3 hours, when Bhagwan got up, he found her still fanning so dedicatedly. And then he told her, he inquired about her, and then told her to bring her husband, Venkatraman, in the evening. But when they went, the door was locked. But then they went to the temple and found him sitting there in the shrine of Lord Ganapati. The first time Bhagwan saw Venkatraman, he said, "Come on, Venkatraman, you are my friend." What a blessing. How many of us would have waited and waited and waited for so long to get a smile from him, a nod of recognition. And here, the first time Venkatraman walked in, and Swami said, "Come on, Venkatraman, you are my friend," as though he was meeting an old friend. What fortune for Venkatraman. Anyway, from that day, Bhagwan also told him, whenever he got time, extra time, that he must come to Bhagwan. So Venkatraman used to go every day and serve him as much as possible in the spare time he had. One day, Venkatraman received the news that he was transferred to Kanchipuram on promotion. So he could not say no. He came and told Bhagwan, but he was crying so much because he did not want to leave Bhagwan. But Bhagwan did not say much. He gave him a shawl and put the condition that only he, his wife and son. The son was born to them only by Bhagwan's grace. So Bhagwan said, the three of you can use the shawl, but don't give it to anyone else. And then he went inside. He brought some old snacks which were rotting. And then he put them there in the shawl and tied them up. And put it on his shoulder and said, Venkatraman, okay, you can go, but this tank is there, Ayyamkula tank, a tank of water, just opposite to Venkatraman's house. So Bhagwan ordered him to go and throw all those snacks into the tank. It's a holy tank, and Arunachaleshwara, I think once a year he would come and have a bath there. So Bhagwan said, you throw all this into the tank, but keep the shawl with you. You take the shawl to your house. Don't throw that. So when he gave this package to Venkatraman, Venkatraman was very, very upset. Oh, Swami is packing me off. I'm crying so much because I cannot bear to be away from him. And see, he's very readily packing me off. He cried even more, very reluctant to leave Thiruvanamalai, but then again in the night, because the next day early morning 3 o'clock he had to go, and therefore in the night he visited once again. And then Swami said, Venkatrama, because he was still crying. So Swami said, don't worry, Kanchipuram Mutt is there, Paramacharya is there, so whenever you get leisure time, every day you must go, you must visit them. So with that condition, Swami left him. And of course Venkatraman went to Kanchipuram. He was there for 2 or 3 or 4 days. And then early morning, 4 o'clock, he would get up and be there at the mutt by 5 o'clock. And then he would get darshan of Paramacharya. It's only after 3 or 4 days when Paramacharya asked him who he was and where he was from. Then he said, Thiruvanamalai. Oh, Thiruvanamalai, Ramanashramam. He said, no, Periyava. My wife and child are there in Thiruvanamalai. There is one Visiri Swamigal, Panka Baba in Thiruvanamalai. I am from him. And then he said, Swami, I have to get a transfer back to Thiruvanamalai. I want to go back to my wife, child and Visiri Swami. Please bless me. And he was crying. Venkatraman was crying, unable to bear the separation from Bhagwan. And Paramacharya, of course, he knew what Venkatraman was feeling. He quite understood. And then he made a strange gesture, at least it seemed so to Venkatraman. And then he made a strange gesture, at least it seemed so to Venkatraman. He put his hand on his own chest and gave a rub, and then raised his hand and blessed him. And the same day, afternoon, the morning itself, when he was coming out of Paramacharya, he saw Jayendra Saraswati Swami, and immediately he went and prostrated to him. And again he put forth his problem. He said, I have been transferred to Kanchipuram, but I want to return to Thiruvanamalai. I want to go back to Yogi Ramsuratkumar. Please bless me to get a transfer from here to Thiruvanamalai. As soon as he said that, Jayendra Periyava said, it's done. It's done. Meaning it's already done. Now it was his turn to react. He said, it is done. Yes. And then he went. When he was having his food in a hotel, the news came from the office to come and receive the post, that day's post. Immediately he rushed there and he got the telegram. Of course he could not open it because he had no authority to open it, but the telegram was there. He was very curious about it, and true to his expectation, it carried the message that he was being transferred back to Thiruvanamalai. Only that day morning, he put forth his problem to Periyava, seeking his blessings, and then he met Jayendra Periyava, who said it's already done. And now, within an hour, he got the transfer order also, which means even before he put forth his problem before Periyava, the transfer order had come. It was on its way to him. So Bhagwan, even while sending him, he was shedding copious tears in front of Bhagwan, unable to bear the separation from him. So Bhagwan, he knew, even while sending him off, that he was going to come back soon by his father's grace. But Venkatraman, in his ignorance, thought Bhagwan was packing him off. He was so ready to pack him off. And he was even more upset. But now, when he got the order, in the evening, when he knew from the director that he was transferred, the director of collegiate education was Dr. Venkata Subramaniam at that time. He also used to visit Paramacharya and Bhagwan at Channadi Street House. In fact, they both of them met in the Kanchipuram Mutt in front of Periyava, in front of Kanchi Acharya. And now the director said, yes, you are transferred to Thiruvanamalai. You can go to Swami there. So Venkatraman was very, very happy. In the meantime, what happened, a curious thing happened. And that day morning at 10:30, when Venkatraman received the telegram, in Thiruvanamalai the scene was different. Two friends of Venkatraman were walking towards a temple. And they were talking among themselves that Venkatraman had gone on a transfer to Kanchipuram. He was very reluctant to do that because he did not want to be separated from Bhagwan. So even as they were talking and coming towards the temple, Bhagwan was coming in the opposite direction. So immediately they prostrated and they talked about Venkatraman and how reluctant he was. Bhagwan said, don't worry, he will be back this evening. Just when Venkatraman was receiving the telegram, here Bhagwan was declaring, pronouncing, oh, Venkatraman will come back. He'll come back this evening itself. And these two friends wondered how it is possible. Venkatraman has joined his duty there in Kanchipuram. I think one has to be there at least for 2 weeks. And so it's not possible for him to come back. Especially the same day. Hardly a few days have gone. And what is the Swami saying? And they wondered. And that day, evening at 7:30, promptly, Venkatraman was back and he was standing before Bhagwan and Bhagwan was waiting for him. He was there outside the house on the steps waiting for Venkatraman. And again, Venkatraman cried and cried, shedding copious tears, but this time it was full of joy. They were joyful tears. So such is the story. Again, it seems to be a worldly thing, a mere transfer from one place to the other. But just see the depth of devotion of a devotee and the relationship, the kinship between a guru and disciple, the service, and how the two Mahatmas acted in unison, and then how everything worked out for the devotee in the end, to his joy and delight. Now such stories, it is we who relived these moments, because even when I narrate, I feel the joy of it, and I'm sure whoever listens to the story with involvement would also be able to relive these moments with Paramacharya, the moments with Bhagwan, sometimes substituting ourselves in the place of Venkatraman or Ganga Mata. Once, when Bhagwan was in Sudama, one Chandramauli came, who was one of the attendants of Paramacharya, who worked as one of the attendants of Paramacharya in Kanchipuram for some time. After that, he came and settled down in Thiruvanamalai. He used to visit Bhagwan. And then when he came, I took permission from Bhagwan and asked this Chandramauli, you were so closely associated with Paramacharya. What did he ever say about Bhagwan? Did he say anything about Bhagwan any time? And Chandramauli said, just looking at Bhagwan with folded hands, once Paramacharya, when he mentioned Bhagwan Yogi Ramsuratkumar's name to Paramacharya, Paramacharya raised his hand, pointed to the sky and said, oh, they're all high up there. When he said that, Bhagwan smiled, and Bhagwan had tears in his eyes, and he turned to me and said, Devaki, just see what kindness, how kind Paramacharya has been to this beggar. There were tears. Such is the love bond, the veneration for each other, the love, the deep love, the love of oneness between the two, though, of course, they were removed, far removed from each other in their style of living. That is the speciality of India. India is the playground of great masters. There are great masters of different traditions. India abounds in such great masters. And though they were traditionally different from each other, each one belonging to a particular tradition, they had all merged. They had all become one with the universal being, with the Supreme, and therefore, though they had different bodies, different styles of living, different set of leelas, different set of devotees, they were still one. Raman Maharishi often said, there are no jnanis, there is only jnana. Meaning, the containers, each jnani is a container of supreme knowledge. The content is the supreme knowledge. The supreme knowledge is one. the containers can be different. So this is what we see. Now, we know this greatness, the very richness of India is this. The great masters are the treasures of India, the true treasure of India. And culture, the Indian culture is rooted in spirituality. The sage of Kanchi, Sri Paramacharya, worked so much towards the protection of Vedas and Vedic Pandits. And Bhagwan sat in one place and smoked, blessing all those Vedic Pandits. He worked in his own way, in his own style, for the protection of Vedas and Vedic Pandits. Again, the style of functioning is different for both, and yet both worked for the same cause. Both were champions of Vedic culture of India. Now this Bhagwan is here right in front of us in the form of his Murti with his hand raised in benediction. We shall submit our today's prayer again before him. There is nothing he does not know, there is nothing that he cannot do.